Currently, Earth.
On April 5th in the year 1968, James Brown is credited for calming down Boston following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. On the morning after the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. continued his eternity, city officials in Boston, Massachusetts were scrambling to prepare for an expected second straight night of unrest. Similar preparations were being made in cities across America, including in the nation's capital, where armed units of the regular army patrolled outside the White House and U.S. Capitol, following our nation's 36th president, Lyndon B. Johnson's state of emergency declaration. But Boston would be nearly alone among America's major cities and remain quiet and calm that turbulent Friday night, thanks in large part to one of the least quiet and calm musical performers of all time. On the night of April 5th in 1968, James Brown kept the peace in Boston by the sheer force of his music and his personal charisma. Brown's appearance that night at the Boston Garden had been scheduled for months, but it nearly didn't happen. Following a long night of uprisings and fires in the predominantly black Roxbury and South End sections of the city, Boston's young mayor, Kevin White, gave serious consideration to canceling an event that some feared would bring the same kind of violence into the city's center. The racial component of those fears was very much on the surface of a city in which school integration and mandatory busing had played a major role in the recent mayoral election. Mayor White faced a politically impossible choice: anger black Bostonians by canceling Brown's concert over transparently racial fears, or antagonize the law and order crowd by simply ignoring those fears. The idea that resolved the mayor's dilemma came from a young African-American city councilman named Tom Atkins, who proposed going on with the concert, but finding a way to mount a free live broadcast of the show in the hopes of keeping most Bostonians at home in front of their TV sets rather than on the streets. Atkins and White convinced public television station WGBH to carry the concert on short notice, but convincing James Brown took some doing. Due to a non-compete agreement relating to an upcoming televised concert, Brown stood to lose roughly $60,000 if his Boston show were televised. Ever the savvy businessman, James Brown made his financial needs known to Mayor White, who made the very wise decision to meet them. The broadcast of Brown's concert had the exact effect it was intended to, as Boston saw less crime that night than would be expected on a perfectly normal Friday in April. There was a moment, however, when it appeared that the plan might backfire. As a handful of young male fans began climbing on stage mid-concert, white Boston policemen began to forcefully push them back. Sensing the volatility of the situation, Brown urged the cops to back away from the stage, then addressed the crowd. Quote, Wait a minute. Now wait, Brown said. Step down now. Be a gentleman. Now I asked the police to step back because I think I can get some respect from my own people. Unquote. James Brown successfully restored order while keeping the police away from the crowd and continued the successful peacekeeping concert in honor of the continuance of eternity of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this day in 1968. It was April 5th in the year 1984 that Kareem Abdul-Jabar scores his 31,000th and 420th point. This is of his career, breaking the NBA's all-time scoring record, which had been held by Wilt Chamberlain. Over 18,000 fans gathered at the Thompson and Mack Center at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. The crowd was there to watch the Utah Jazz play Abdul-Jabar and the Los Angeles Lakers on April 5th. With less than 9 minutes left in the game, Magic Johnson passed the ball to his 7'2" teammate, and Abdul-Jabbar scored his 22nd point of the night and 31,420th point of his career. The game stopped as Abdul-Jabbar's teammates rushed to congratulate him, and the fans gave him an extended standing ovation. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, at 37, was then taken out of the game after making 10 of 14 baskets from the field and 2 out of 2 from the foul line, plus 5 rebounds and 3 assists. The Lakers went on to win the game, 129-115. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was born Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr. on April 16, 1947 in New York City, and changed his name in 1971 after converting to Islam. As a star center at UCLA, he led his team to 3 NCAA championships in 1967, 1968, and 1969. He was selected by the Milwaukee Bucks as the first overall pick in 1969 NBA draft and named NBA Rookie of the Year in 1970. The following season, the Bucks took home the NBA championship, and Abdul-Jabbar won the first of a record 6 Most Valuable Player awards he received during his 20-year NBA career. In 1975, Abdul-Jabbar joined the Lakers and became part of a dynasty that won the NBA championship in 1980, 1982, 1985, 1987, and 1988. Abdul-Jabbar, who was named to a record 19 NBA All-Star teams, retired from pro basketball at age 42 in 1989 with 38,387 points. He remains the NBA's all-time leading scorer. By comparison, Karl Malone scored 36,374 points in 19 seasons. Michael Jordan scored 32,392 points in 15 seasons, while Wilt Chamberlain racked up 31,419 points in 14 seasons, and Moses Malone had 27,409 points in 19 seasons. In addition to his all-time scoring record, Abdul-Jabbar held the league record for most minutes played, 54,446, and most blocked shots, 3,189. He was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 1995. It was April 5th in the year 1995 that grunge rock icon Kurt Cobain continues his eternity. Kurt's body was discovered inside his home in Seattle, Washington, 3 days later by Gary Smith, an electrician who was installing a security system in his house. Despite indications that Kurt, the lead singer of Nirvana, had killed himself, some skeptics questioned the circumstances of his continuance and pinned responsibility on his wife, Courtney Love. Kurt Cobain's downward spiral began taking shape in Italy the previous month. He went into a coma and nearly continued his eternity after mixing champagne and the drug Rofinol. The public was led to believe that the coma was induced by an accidental heroin overdose, since Cobain had a well-known problem with the drug. Back at home in Seattle's Denny Blaine neighborhood, the police were called to Cobain and Love's home when he again threatened to kill himself. Although Cobain stated in a 1991 interview that he didn't believe in guns, the officers confiscated 4 from his possession. As his wife and friends watched him spin out of control, they attempted to intervene. Cobain mostly ignored their concerns but reluctantly checked into a rehabilitation clinic in Los Angeles at the end of March. On March 30th, Cobain walked away from the clinic without informing his family or friends. For the next few days, Love could not locate him and decided to hire a private detective on April 3rd. The detective made contact with Cobain the following day in Seattle, but Cobain refused to return to Los Angeles. In the meantime, Cobain had convinced a friend to buy him a gun, claiming he needed it for protection. On April 5th, Cobain returned home. He had ingested enough Valium and heroin to reach near fatal levels. In the apartment above the garage was Cobain's suicide note, quoting Neil Young's lyric that it is, quote, better to burn out than to fade away, unquote. Historic information divulged on this audio file can be verified on history.com.